the conversation? If so, give us a call. 314-690-1909. If you call that number, 314-690-1909, we can talk about UFOs. I'll get you on the podcast. We'll talk right now. Our Facebook Live audience will hear you and see you, and you will be on the podcast. I can see that you're listening. I can see that you're watching. So if you want to go ahead and call, please feel free. The number's on the screen. Buck Nelson, George Adamski, two of the first pioneers, but there were others. There was a guy named Daniel Fry. This guy was born in 1908, so just wasn't quite born in the 1800s. But again, he was one of the first ufologists. They didn't call him that back then, but they called him flying saucer scientists or something. They called him something different. The term ufologist had not yet been thought up. But he was born in Minnesota, and he moved to Alamogordo, New Mexico, okay? And he was an American contactee who claimed that he had multiple contacts with an alien and took a ride in a remotely piloted alien spacecraft back in 1949. So again, all these guys had been on spacecrafts and been someplace. So there's a common thread here. Now, from the White Sands Proving Grounds in New Mexico, that's where Fry worked, he had planned to join a party back on July 4th, 1949 in Las Cruces, but he missed the last bus to the party, okay? So he found the officers' quarters at the base where he was staying at too hot, so he decided just to take a walk in the desert evening down a path he had never been. Now, Fry claimed that a 30-foot long, 10-foot diameter, or a 30-foot long, that's 10 meters in diameter, 16-foot high, oblate spheroid is what he called it, landed in front of him. And he talked remotely with the pilot who operated the craft from a mothership. So kind of like a drone, okay? Didn't have drones back then, but that's what he's describing. And he flew 900 miles above the earth. Now, Fry claimed he was invited aboard and flown over New York City and back in 30 minutes. So from New Mexico to New York City, back 30 minutes. During the flight and subsequent meetings, Fry asserted that he talked with a pilot named Alan. And he gave Fry information on physics and the prehistory of Earth, including Atlantis and Lemuria and the foundations of civilization. Now, Adamski, like Nelson, like Fry, all three of these guys, basically they did this most or much of their life. Now, here's the one thing. None of them ever really made any real money at this. And that's the big thing, because if you've made hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, you can understand why someone would do it. Adamski did make money on his books, but Fry, Nelson, never really made money, didn't make any money. 314-690-1909. That's the phone number if you want to call into the podcast and talk about UFOs. The last and quite possibly the most famous of all the early day ufologists was a guy named Dr. Frank E. Stranges. Now, Frank E. Stranges is special in my mind. And the reason being is because Dr. Frank E. Stranges was the first guy I ever read about who talked about UFOs. And I read about Dr. Frank E. Stranges back, golly, this must have been late 1960s. And I grew up in Normandy. I grew up real close to the airport, let's just say that. If you know where the Hanley Road Metrolink station is, that's where I grew up. Well, they had a library. The closest library to our house was actually in Pine Lawn, if you know where that is. Basically, you take Florissant Road to Natural Bridge Road into Pine Lawn, and there was the library. I would ride my bike to the library, okay, on a Saturday morning. And I would sit in the library and read. And one of the books that I would read, and I read it multiple times, checked it out when I could, was Stranger at the Pentagon by Dr. Frank E. Stranges. Now, Stranger at the Pentagon was a book that talked about Donald Keel, Buck Nelson, all these guys, these early ufologists. Donald Keel, by the way, was a U.S. major in the U.S. Air Force, or in the U.S. Navy, rather. And he was a big guy who actually founded NICAP, which was the predecessor to MUFON. But Frank Stranges talked about all these guys, okay, these early UFO guys. And he talked about Valiant Thor, thank you, Valiant Thor, who was a visitor from Venus. Okay. And you think to yourself, well, why would a visitor from Venus come down and talk to us? And why would anybody care? Folks, this Valiant Thor, who claimed to be a visitor from Venus, actually addressed the Pentagon and talked about all this kind of stuff. Now, here's a question for you. If Dr. Frankie Stranges, and he was a doctor, he held doctorate degrees in theology, criminology, and psychology, so he was no dummy. And if everybody was convinced that Valiant Thor, who claimed he was a visitor from Venus, was such a whack job, why did the Pentagon agree to have an audience with him? Do you find that odd? The Pentagon actually had this guy talk. They listened to him. A guy who said, look, I'm from Venus, and I'm going to tell you all about some stuff. They said, sure, come down and talk to us. And they had hearings, and he talked to them. All these are documented in Frankie Stranges' book, Stranger at the Pentagon. So, again, if Valiant Thor was just a goofy, wacky, made-up figment of somebody's imagination, why would the Pentagon have listened to him? Why would they have taken the time to have this guy sit down and talk? Frank E. Stranges was the one who brought this to the forefront. In fact, his whole life can kind of be summarized in his eulogy. Okay, here's his eulogy. It's very interesting. Frank E. Stranges held degrees in theology, criminology, and psychiatry, or psychology rather. He has dedicated his life to the study of the Bible and other sacred texts in relationship to spiritual growth and understanding not only of our planet and its people, but also those from other worlds. Since 1959, Dr. Strange has physically met and conversed with our friends from Venus, and he continues to this day to enjoy their fellowship. Now remember, he's dead. This is his eulogy, okay? It is in concert with the divine creator and with these wonderful beings that Dr. Strange teaches and guides others to a greater understanding of themselves and the universe. He leads the Inner Circle, an international group of like-minded individuals committed on strengthening the world, light through action. That's what they call their organization. And he publishes a monthly newsletter entitled Interspace Link, which promotes the greater understanding of universal spirituality and unfolds information volunteered by our space friends. Think about that eulogy, especially that last line. He publishes a monthly newsletter. Now, again, he's dead, but they're talking like he still does it, because he kind of does in their eyes. Publishes a monthly newsletter entitled Interspace Link, which promotes greater understanding of the universal spirituality and unfolds information volunteered by our space friends. In his eulogy, after he's dead, when he has no chance of making any money, they're still talking about his newsletter, which gets its information from beings from another planet. Now, those of you who think to yourself, oh my God, Strong has really gone off the deep end, consider this. In my opinion, I've said this before, UFOs are real. Spacecraft from Venus, maybe not. UFOs are real. I know that because I've seen them. I've seen one, I'll say that. In fact, not only have I seen one at in Death Valley at the Panamint Springs Resort. But Ben Castle, the owner of the Panamint Springs Resort, who I interviewed on one of my recent podcasts, he saw a UFO. In fact, during the interview, I asked him, I said, so what have you seen since you've been out here? He said, well, one time I did see something. And he described to me the exact UFO that I had seen. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I didn't allude to what I had seen. I never told him that I had seen anything. But he described the same UFO to me that I saw. Blinking lights, red and blue. It would be stationary. It would rapid up, rapid down, rapid east, rapid west, go this way, go that way, then zap, gone. He saw the same thing that I saw in the same area. Is that a coincidence? No, friends. It's not a coincidence. It's UFO. Or, to put it a little bit better, it's a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Same, a little bit different. Remember, if you believe in UFOs, you're a tinfoil hat wearing wacko. If you say you believe in UAPs, you're a member of a Senate subcommittee. Just take the words, twist them a little bit differently, make them say the same thing, only a tad differently. That's the only difference between what's going on now and what's going on then. So that's the only difference. Did you enjoy the podcast? Do you think I'm a wacko? Do you think I'm a goofball? Maybe so. I don't know. But something to consider. Again, this is November 7th. Okay. We still don't have a firm answer on who's going to be president of the United States. But both sides are pointing fingers at the other one. You lie, you cheat, you steal, you're bad, I'm good. All these lies that are put forth on social media, you're going to believe that they're both Russian bots. They're both stealing the election. They're both this and this and this and that. Some of you will believe this from one side or the other. Some of you will believe that. But you won't believe that perhaps, just perhaps, something other than us have visited this planet then, now, and will in the future. So I guess I'll end this podcast with, for your consideration. Just consider what I have to say, okay? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And remember, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of all the Sherlock Holmes novels. Now, granted, they're books, they're fantasy, they're not real, they're fiction. But one thing that Sherlock Holmes always said, if you want to find the truth, what you have to do first is eliminate all the falseness, everything that's not true. And what's left, that's your answer. So in other words, if not this, then what? Well, that's it. We're done. Thanks for listening to the podcast. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. Okay. Send me your email address. That's the best way to get it. You send me your email address. I send you a link to the podcast. You get a link to the podcast upon publication. You download it and you listen to it at your leisure. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. So until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.